Nvidia GeForce RTX 4060 graphics card. That's what I'm going to review today for you guys. The ASUS variant, ASUS ROG Strix gaming graphics card. Very nice design with really cool RGB effects. But the question is, in which systems does this graphics card make sense? What is the gaming performance, for example, in Cyberpunk? I did extensive benchmarks with this card and tested it in different systems. And you have to know this is a PCI 4.0 graphics card with only 8 lanes. So it doesn't have 16 lanes like the bigger brothers, the RTX 4070 and 4080. And that's why you should definitely consider in what system are you going to put this RTX 4060, because you don't want to pair it with PCIe 3.0 systems. In my case, I'm testing it with AM4 because I think a lot of people have AM4, and I'm also testing it with an ASUS ROG Strix board and the entry-level Ryzen 5600X CPU. And yeah guys, the question is, what are the optimal graphics settings that you can expect with a RTX 4060? And in the case of Cyberpunk, what I found with the WQHD resolution, as you could see just a second ago, the ray tracing light with some ray tracing, not really heavy ray tracing, but from all my testing, to apply a moderate amount of ray tracing, that works really well. So let's quickly run the benchmark and see how much this is all actually utilized. And as you can see here, because we applied ray tracing and because we're running the 4060, which is more geared towards 1080p gaming, because I'm running it at WQHD resolution, which is a higher resolution. The resolution between 1080p and 4K is WQHD. So the card is not marketed at that, but I found it very playable. I have mostly over 60 FPS, 70, 80. That jumps around a little bit depending where on the map you are. Moving ahead a little bit here, 60 FPS is, I think, very reasonable. And you can see that the Ryzen 5600X has no problem with the RTX 4060. So I think this AM4 system in this case is a very good pairing. As you can see here, we didn't even use frame generation. So potentially if you added frame generation, then you have more frames. You could even get higher with that. To give you an overview, I run through all the settings. We start with 1080p. That's the FPS I got. And you could, if you play in a lower resolution, potentially even go to ray tracing medium for your convenience and comparison. I also added, okay, what FPS would you get if you have a RTX 4070 on the same kind of AM4 system? And you could see at ray tracing low, you would get 29 FPS more, 20 FPS or 16 FPS. However, saying that, if you had a RTX 4070 you would run this at a low resolution, the more you dial down the resolution and the more you go down with the settings, the more you're moving the bottleneck towards the CPU. So that would be with a 4070 not an ideal pairing. With a higher resolution, 1040p, it's a different story. Here you can also see the RTX 4060. I think my favorite preferred setting is ray tracing low, because ray tracing, you buying an Nvidia card for the ray tracing, let's be straightforward about it, at least in the case of Cyberpunk. I mean, there are some games, they are better optimized for ray tracing, others are worse optimized. And again, if you would run the same hardware with a 4070, you would have 34 FPS more, 27, respectively 26. And the higher you go up with the resolution, the higher you go up with the graphics settings, the less the CPU actually matters. And I know in the case of the RTX 4070, even if you bump it up to the highest setting, Ray Tracing Ultra, and you would put in an X3D cache CPU, you may get slightly higher FPS, but the CPU bottleneck is really not that noticeable at these highest graphic settings with the RTX 4070 as well. With the 4060, I wouldn't go higher than ray tracing low. That's what I found the most comfortable. So, but when could you potentially run in a CPU bottleneck? Maybe, or other problems. I mean, this system is not the newest, but it's not the oldest. The problem that you might run into is that I showed you initially, the RTX 4060 is a 8-lane card. So I would really encourage you, if you want to use that card, make sure you have a system that supports PCIe 4.0. And I would say at least you should have a B550 chipset with an actual CPU that supports the PCIe 4.0. And that's my conclusion right now. If you have an older system that has only PCIe 3.0, either because of the board or because of the CPU, then I would not use this pairing, because yeah, then you might have not enough bandwidth. You have a reduced bandwidth, and that's not what you want. But otherwise, if you have a system like I showed you with the B550 chipset, and that works really, really well. I really like this card, especially also because the RGB effects. For me, it's a really entry-level card. If you're just an occasional gamer, that works really well. And the ASUS ROG Strix products usually are very nice build quality as well, from all the power regulators and what's on the PCB itself. So guys, what other cards do you want to see? Do you want to see direct battle of the graphics cards between, for example, the RTX 4060 and the RTX 4070? Or I could also compare the RTX 4060 against a weaker from AMD, let's say the 6600. This and more coming up. Leave a subscribe, and I see you in the next video.